I'm going to show you how to draw a rose in graphite, so let's get started. The first step is to draw contours. To draw the contours of the rose, I've drawn a 3x3 grid and a 2x2 grid on top of the 3x3. The 2x2 is going to help me with the center details in the rose, and I'm using a 2H graphite pencil to start drawing. So let's go ahead and draw the contours. Okay, so the rose contours are now complete, and if you want to use this as a reference, just take a screenshot and work off of it, and you can just take as much time as you like. The next thing I'll do is start shading. First thing I do after contours is add a really nice undertone. So I use a cotton swab to give a really nice even light gray kind of a color, so that when I start doing highlights and shadows, I'm not starting from a blank slate. So let's do that. So I'm basically dipping my cotton swab in graphite powder that I made at home. I used a 4B graphite stick to make a fine powder using a sans green, and I'm using that to cover the entire paper and create my base color. And after I do the background, I'm just using a Q-tip and dipping it in graphite powder to make almost like an outline around the rose, and I'm going to blend it out into the background. Okay, so now that we're done with the background, I like how the tone looks like right now. The base color is pretty good. So now I'm going to start carving out the highlights, and I'm going to use a Kneadable eraser for that. So I'm going to mold it the way I want, and I'm going to use it to start erasing the highlights. The good thing about using Kneadable eraser is it really lets you hit the smaller areas as well as the larger areas. So now I took my Q-tip to start doing the shadows, using the same graphite powder and just like going over and blending the shadows into the highlights. I'm also using my blending stump to define the shadows a little bit more, just for cleaning up a little bit. Q-tips don't allow me to get into the edges a lot, so I'm using my really old dirty stumps. I've been using them for a really long time, so they're quite a bit used and they have a lot of graphite on them already, but they really help me clean up the edges and define the shadows. And I'm also using my pen eraser to clean up the highlights, so let's do that. Okay, so now that I'm done identifying the shadows and the highlights, I'm ready to move on to the next step. I'm using my 4B pencil to define the petals and their edges. You'll notice that I have a paper on top of the drawing. I use the paper as a way to protect the drawing from getting smudged by my own hand while I'm still working on it. So in this step, I'm going to use my pencil to sharpen the details and give it more life. So I'm using a 6B pencil for it. I've sharpened it quite a bit to be able to reach into smaller areas, and I'm still using my blending stump and the Q-tip to soften and blend the graphite. So let's do that. Moving on to the next step, I'm gonna add a background to this drawing. You don't have to, but I'm going to. And I'm using my graphite powder, and I'll apply it with my blending stump, cotton swab, and Q-tip. And I'll really add some dynamic to this drawing. Alright, so the background is now complete, and now we can go ahead and add some texture to this. This is the last step in the drawing process. It's optional, but it really adds a lifelike element to your drawing. I'm using an 8B pencil to intensify the shadows, and I'm using a 2B pencil to add some cross hatching on the petals, and I'm also going to use 2B pencil for creating the water droplets. So there you have it. Our rose drawing is now complete. I hope you have a good drawing on your hands now, and I hope it gave you a head start on how to draw still life. See you in the next one, and thank you for watching.